What we do know is that temporary accommodation has quite an impact on children. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that children miss school because of temporary accommodation. Either they're moved outside of their local authority area, or they're travelling a long way to school, or they kind of don't really ever get into school. We know that temporary accommodation impacts on health. So we can see that through the self-reported stories of families where their health deteriorates living in temporary accommodation, partly due to the actual accommodation itself, and partly because they get disconnected from their normal health services and they fall out of things like prescriptions and appointments and things like that. We found that there is a correlation between children living in temporary accommodation and mortality. So mortality is much higher if you live in temporary accommodation than if you don't. And that's particularly stark effect for babies under 1 and for families from ethnic minority backgrounds. One of the biggest things that families tell us about temporary accommodation is that they don't feel safe. And that's particularly stark when it's mixed. So if you've got single homeless men in the same accommodation as families will report really strongly quite uncomfortable scenarios. We've got to realise that our political stability and our cohesiveness as a society probably relies on housing. So if we start to value housing and see it as a basis for all the other outcomes that we want across our society, then we'll start to win. If we're going to be building our way out of this, which seems to be our current plan, what does it look like to mitigate the effects? And my interest is particularly on children, and there's definitely work the councils and the government can do to mitigate the now effects on the population of kids who are entering TA now. For a lot of our families, they are working, and I think I'd really encourage councils to try and protect that work. So please do not rehouse families or send them miles away from work, because they will end up out of work. I'd say for children, please can we encourage all our schools to make adaptations for children who are in temporary accommodation. We're trying to get an amendment through the Children's Wellbeing Bill so that councils must tell schools when kids are in TA, because we know it makes a difference to how those schools react and how they support the families. And Manchester's been supporting that pilot. But that's a really easy win. Can we make sure that kids have access to food, that mums can wash their clothes, that kids can learn to crawl, and that there's enough space for that? Please do not put newborn babies into hostels. It's really unsafe. Please make it a never event in your councils. Please change your housing policy so that if you've got small levels of housing associated debt, that is not a blocker for bidding. If you do not know if kids have a cot in TA, just get them a cot. There's stuff you can do in your council now to make life better for your kids and reduce your mortality rate.